Good afternoon, and welcome to the Model Program of Study Guide webinar in education. We are so excited to have you join us this afternoon. Today, we're going to do a couple of things, right? So we're going to hear from ICCB and also our colleagues here at EdSystems. You all are going to receive background context on the Model Program of Study Guides. Within that, we're going to include some policy alignments and also the role of the advisory committee. And then we're going to talk about how we map within our guides. And then we're going to dive deep into the education guide itself. We have our colleagues here from Sucks Valley Community College that are going to talk about how they use this particular guide in action. And then lastly, we're going to be able to provide some opportunity for feedback and next steps. So a couple of things I think it's important for us to note here. So we want you all to use the chat box, right? And the Q&A option. So if you have questions, we want to be able to answer them in real time. Again, as you know, this webinar is being recorded. So the slide deck is linked in the chat and it will be available for view on our website along with our other two, our other webinar on health science and technology. And so now I would like to welcome Janelle Jones.
Thank you. So hi again, I'm Janelle Jones, Director for Career and Technical Education at the Illinois Community College Board. And on behalf of the ICCB, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Model Programs of Study and Education webinar. As you know, this is the second webinar in the series, and so we really look forward to today's session as well as the future webinars. And finally, I just want to thank EdSystems for the continued partnership and for their great work in facilitating the development and the implementation of the Model Programs of Study. And with that, I will turn it over.
Thank you, Janelle. We really appreciate your support and your partnership and all the work that we do. And I want to turn over to my colleague here at EdSystems to introduce themselves. Juan Jose.
Hi, everyone. I'm Juan Jose Gonzalez, Pathways Director for Education Systems Center.
And so as we are introducing ourselves, we want to give you a chance to introduce yourselves as well. So if you can utilize the chat function and type in your name and also the organization that you represent, that would be greatly appreciated. EdSystems' mission is to shape and strengthen education and workforce systems to advance racial equity and prepare more young people for productive careers and a global economy. So we do that through the creation of college and career pathways and the creation of bridges to post-secondary education. Our work is data-driven and highly collaborative. It's statewide, it's across community networks and across community projects. So I'm going to pass it over to Juan to give you all some feedback on the Model Program of Study itself.
Great. Thank you all very much for joining. So I see a lot of us have been joining from various community colleges across the state. So that's really exciting and a great opportunity for us. So as you may be asking, and many of you may be going through this right now, there's going to be the new state's Perkins 5 plan was reauthorized a few years ago, really kind of dictated the creation of these model programs of study, right? So Illinois Community College Board, in partnership with the Education Systems Center, also in partnership with the Illinois State Board of Education, community colleges throughout the state, and high school networks, we created these model programs of study, mostly to create an opportunity for folks to see templates or examples that they could kind of adopt or customize in alignment with their implementation of the Perkins 5 plan. As a part of kind of the state's ideal program of study or, template model program of study, we also try to identify very priority dual credit and early college courses that were going to be foundational to that programs of study, right? So that whether they be in health science, education, technology, manufacturing, things of that nature, we wanted to kind of set those forth in our guides. And we also wanted to define certain competencies that could be sequenced along a program study, right? And that program of study not only is in isolation either in high school or at the post-secondary space, but we actually wanted to create a program of study that kind of sequence competencies, skills, and developments from high school to and through the community college system. And we wanted to also kind of identify unique opportunities for employers or third-party organizations to support coursework and work-based learning related experiences. Next slide, Megan. So we developed these kind of programs of study with certain intended audiences in mind, right? So the first audience is obviously high school faculty working on pathways, whether that be a CT director, a CT teacher, principals, district administrators, things of that nature, right? Another key audience for this was community college faculty and administrators, right? Academic deans, department heads, early college liaisons, folks who not only interface with high school students, but are also kind of implementing programs of study for adult learners and kind of regular college going students as well. So figuring out how those kind of academic, post-secondary academic faculty would be able to interface and understand and digest these guides as well. Another important aspect of our state's kind of educational system is education for employment directors, folks who sit at the implementation of kind of CT Perkins funds in high school and in collaboration with community colleges as well. We've had our programs of study presentation in September around health science. Today you're participating in the education model programs of study presentation and webinar, but we have subsequent presentations coming in manufacturing and engineering, information technology, and then in the new year as well, the agriculture, food, and natural resources. You will be able to see on the next slide, Megan, in subsequent slides, some of our information around kind of all the programs of study we have created, and you'll be able to see on that link when those upcoming webinars are. What you're seeing now on your screen is kind of what we like to call like the state's coalescing pathways model, right? A program of study or a pathway, which we use sometimes interchangeably, although program of study is a little more technical and relates to kind of federal funding. But what we like to say is a good program of study, a good pathway, has 4 key components that are always going to be present in supporting that pathway, right? So there's going to be some individual student planning, some individual student preparation, planning, and longitudinal like analysis of what they should be preparing and acquiring in terms of skills, competencies, degrees, and things of that nature. There's also going to be a focus on career-focused instruction, right? CTE courses and or related kind of career-focused courses within a certain industry as well. A good pathway or program of study will also have a very robust work-based learning, and that includes things such as career exploration, internships, potentially apprenticeship opportunities, team-based challenges, things of that nature as well, right? And there's a lot of resources about what is a good work-based learning activities and examples of such that we include in a lot of our resources and materials. I also want to make a plug, and I'll make this plug at the end of the webinar, for our Illinois IWIN network, which is a heavy work-based learning innovation network where a lot of those resources are discussed in detail. And last but not least, our programs of study and all our pathways always have kind of a significant attention paid to core academic subject areas, right? How does English, math, but also science and social science complement the career-focused instruction that we're normally kind of paying attention to, and how can they be collaboratively kind of enhancing a student's education or attainment, right? And once again, like I mentioned, a good pathway is not happening in isolation either in secondary or in post-secondary, but building upon each other and starting in secondary, going to and through post-secondary institutions with young people or adult learners being able to earn stackable credentials, various degrees, advanced certificates at a college setting, entering the workforce with semi-skilled jobs, and then kind of progressing into more middle skilled and advanced skilled jobs for a large labor market participation. I want to highlight one thing. If you do one click, Megan. Up until now, there really hadn't been a way for a young person to indicate that they had some pathway experience while in high school other than being a CTE concentrator, right? So what the state created in 2016 with the passage of the Post-Secondary Workforce and Readiness Act was the creation of a college and career pathway endorsement. That's a marking on a student's high school transcript that indicates a multiple year experience in a pathway and or a program of study. If you click on the next slide. What you're seeing here on your screen is kind of the requirements of the College and Career Pathway Endorsement as kind of mandated by the PWR Act and kind of regulated and implemented by the Illinois State Board of Education. You'll see here with the next click that our programs of study are going to have a significant overlap with the College and Career Pathway Endorsement in the areas of career-focused instructional sequences and academic readiness. our programs of study have a huge emphasis on coursework, the sequence of those courses, and how those courses relate to student eligibility, teacher credentialing, and preparation for post-secondary opportunities. So we just wanted to note here, there's a lot of moving parts in our state around pathways development, pathways progression, and there is starting to be a significant amount of synergy and interlocking of kind of competencies, interlocking of kind of patterns and policy alignment, which should be beneficial to both high school implementers and community college implementers as well. Go ahead, Megan. Well, thank you. Not only is there alignment with the College and Career Pathway Endorsement, I wanted to highlight other big key areas of projects and educational foundations that are being implemented that have huge alignment with our model programs of study. I've mentioned the Post-Secondary Workforce and Readiness Act, which not only dictates the College and Career Pathway Endorsement, but also kind of mandates the scaling of transitional instruction throughout the state, the scaling of competency-based education, and the kind of PACE framework, which is like a student readiness framework and kind of career exploration activities. There's also huge tie-ins to the Dual Credit Quality Act and the Model Partnership Agreement. There's a huge overlap with the state's ESSA plan and the College and Career Readiness Indicator. And of course, we're always paying attention to kind of the Illinois labor market and the Illinois efforts to revitalize the Illinois economy. So the model programs of study that you're going to be seeing here today is trying as best as possible to tie into these various other policy mechanisms and trying to create synergy all around. Go around. What we'd like to kind of tell folks is that anyone who's implementing a model program of study, college career pathway, or things of that nature, that student is going to become somewhat unique in the educational landscape in three key areas. First, a student implementing our model programs of study is going to have some foundational skills that are going to be implemented or accessible for all careers, right? They're going to have general employability skills, a good understanding of teamwork and kind of professionalism in a general workplace setting. They're also going to be accelerated towards a specific career area by having multiple years of coursework as required by the program of study. They're going to have some emphasis on early college courses in that career-focused area, and they're going to have experience with courses that beyond just a traditional high school experience, where they're going to have some advanced CTE courses, potentially some industry credentials, or some complementary and advanced general education courses as well. And by definition, someone who completes a model program of study and or a college career pathway endorsement is going to be academically ready for post-secondary, right? They're going to have some early college coursework under their belt, and they're going to have passed some of the requirements around transitional courses and college level placement in math and English. Next slide. What you see here on your screen now is the 8 guides that were done in conjunction over the last 2 years with the Illinois Community College Board, the Illinois State Board of Education, various community college kind of advisory members, and high school faculty throughout the state. We've done guides in education, health science, IT, manufacturing, engineering. Recent guides were published this summer in agriculture, food and natural resources, architecture, construction and energy, arts, communications, finance, and business services. For those of you greatly interested, that link on the bottom left of your slide is the link to our homepage where all these guides situate and kind of exist. There is a 20-page kind of like larger PDF per guide. There's also like a 1-page kind of just visual of each. We have registrations for upcoming webinars and at that web page. And whenever we complete this webinar, we will also upload the recording and the slide deck from this webinar to that web page as well. And we welcome you all to kind of look at that and explore that page and further. One last thing I wanted to highlight is that with the creation of each guide, it wasn't really an effort. It was not Education System Center creating these guides by ourselves in a dark room, cooking up information and research, right? What we tried to do is we did an initial set of desk research based on labor market information and typical kind of community college resources, but then we informed our decision making, informed our guides with a significant kind of advisory committee. For each guide, there was an advisory committee that existed around 15 to 30 people, depending on the industry sector. They really kind of provided us expertise on what are the labor market trends for that industry sector, what degrees, credentials, certificates were we not really capturing based on our kind of review of community colleges throughout the state, and what our dex analysis was missing, and what were the kind of, what was also, well, what they also provided is what was the future trajectory of this industry sector that was not presently captured, or where was it trending, right? They informed key decisions in our pathway map approach. They helped us select early college credit courses, and in some subcommittees or sub working group members even helped us create a set of key competencies for select courses in the model programs of study. So for those of you who have attended these meetings or are part of an advisory committee, we thank you for your effort and your energy. It's been a great process, and we look forward to starting a new set of guides in the next academic year in various subject areas, and you will have more information on that at the culmination of our webinar. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you, Juan Jose. And so what you see here is a list of the 5 key elements that are a part of each of our guides. And as Juan Jose just stated, we used an advisory committee to support this process, and it took about 6 months. So with that advisory process, again, there was extensive desk research that took place. There was lots of edits, updates, changes, and then also the guides were up for public, an extensive period of time for public comment. So in this moment, what we're going to do is we're going to dive a little bit deep into how we determined our high priority occupations and also our promising credentials and mapping to stackable degrees and certificates. So a couple of things that you should know. So we started this process by critically thinking about what were the right occupations to benchmark our pathways and programs of studies to. And so we defined a high priority occupation as an occupation that had a high growth in our state and also earned a living wage with 1 adult and 1 child. And so we calculated that information using an MIT living wage calculator and also the Career One Stop website and the Department of Labor data. A promising credential is defined as any degree or certification that immediately prepares an individual to enter into a high priority occupation. And so these particular occupations we focused on the occupations that had parallel programs within community college, and we researched credentials that were stackable towards various academic programs. And so what you're looking at is a snapshot of the majority of the work that we did, right? So you see on the far left side, a list of particular occupations. There's the median wage for the hourly wage. And then we ask ourselves the question, does this hourly wage equate to a living wage? And is there growth within our state? What are the annual job openings? And then what's the entry point for education for these particular careers? And so these are the type of things that we grappled with within our advisory committee. And so, you know what, let me go back because there are a couple of things I want to point out here that's important to note. And so the green dots that you see are the particular positions that we flagged because we said, you know what, yes, this position offers a living wage and there's growth. The yellow dot represents the occupations that we really had to sit down and have further discussion about whether or not they met the threshold. And then the ones that don't have a dot associated with the role were omitted because they did not meet our benchmarking threshold. And so what you see here on this slide is how we decided what degree programs were affiliated with each particular position. And so we reviewed them and researched this work at different institutions throughout the state of Illinois. And some of the occupations were stackable to an associate's degree or different specialty certificate programs. So now what I'm going to talk about is how we identified strategic community college courses. And so we narrowed in on our high priority occupations by analyzing the academic credentials associated with the particular occupation. More specifically, we researched various community college programs, and then we took a deep dive into the program requirements for those particular degree programs to see which courses appeared most frequently, which courses were accessible for dual credit, and also accessible in terms of high school credentialing high school instructors to teach the course as adjunct faculty. We also looked at the courses that were transferable and had portability throughout the state of Illinois, rather through articulation agreements or partnerships between community colleges and other universities. Lastly, we selected courses that led to an industry credential. So for example, in culinary, there's a course titled Food Sanitation that can lead to a Serve Safe Food Protection Manager certificate. And so right here is like our back of the house data, right? So this is all the work that we did. It was very intentional and extremely detailed, right? So as you can see, it highlights the college that we selected in the moment. So right here, you see CCC, but that was one among many. And then you see the course title, the common name, prerequisites, the articulation code, other notes that we had. And so we did this for many of our programs that spanned across many community colleges throughout the state of Illinois. I know the writing is small, but again, this will be linked so that you all will have access to kind of take a little deeper dive into it if you're not able to read the writing in the moment. Oh, so there we go. So we zoom in there for you. So you can kind of look at that for a moment and just take it all in. Next, I'm going to talk about how we map from secondary to post-secondary sequence. And so some of the recommendations is that we want high school students to get at least 6 career-focused degree credit hours by their completion of high school. We want to keep the possibility for open and unique opportunities that include like work-based learning, capstone courses, or even apprenticeship programs. We want to consider faculty and teacher credentials as well as course delivery. We know that with COVID, we've been creative in how we've taught our classes, whether it be online or in person or asynchronous, et cetera. We suggest an initial post-secondary sequence that continue to accelerate our students. So we want to make sure that we decrease the time to completion for students who participate in pathway programs or do credit. And then we recommend that the sequence in general education subject areas include early college and AP supplements. And lastly, we define related technical competencies. And so the courses that we chose to highlight competencies for were highly strategic in our program of study sequence, but we selected courses that were not portable or transferable within the state articulation initiatives. We looked at which credential was associated with each course. We looked at if there could be access to early credit for that particular course, and we gathered as much information as we could from various institutions. This information included various syllabi from school districts, community colleges, and even four-year institutions. And so within that, we took a deeper dive and looked at some of the commonalities in the learning outcomes and objectives, and then combined them into a set of competencies that you all find in the guides. And so now I'm gonna pass it back over to Juan Jose to give an overview of the education guide itself.
Great. Thank you, Megan. What you're seeing here on your screen is like a single page kind of like snapshot of the complete Model Programs of Study Guide in Education. I'm going to go into the various sections because this slide is very small. So just be patient with us, and you don't have to strain your eyes. One thing I want to do before I move forward is I want to give credit to my colleague Heather Panzak. She's not able to join us here today, but Heather Panzak was our kind of committee lead for the Model Programs of Study in Education, facilitated a discussion among community college staff, high school staff, Teach Plus, and other advocates in the state around kind of education and teacher pipelining. So I just want to give her credit for the creation of this guide and kind of the various intricacies of it. Next slide. So the first thing I wanted to highlight in our Model Programs of Study for Education is a deep dive on the occupations, wages, and growth in this sector, right? So I'll start at the bottom of this chart here on your screen. We reference kind of MIT's living wage calculator and cite that kind of threshold that we really cared about, as well as we provided hyperlink with the kind of Department of Labor's Career One-Stop page where we got a lot of this information at that time. You'll see in the kind of bottom half of the chart that there's kind of the associate's degrees in elementary education, secondary education, special education. There's also other kind of like high school education, associates, and things of that nature. Most community colleges in the state offer some kind of associates of arts or associates of science that transfers for a four-year program and prepares for a bachelor's degree where a young person could then be able to become an elementary, secondary, or special education teacher. When you are kind of like a full-blown professional educator licensed teacher at a public school in the state, your median annual wage is going to be well above kind of the living wage benchmark, and there's going to be steady and not overwhelming but steady growth throughout the state as well. In the top section, we would like to call that section kind of the early childhood bucket of the education pathway, right? Many community colleges, many universities have early childhood programs, and these are some of the degrees that were typically available in them as well, right? So there was an Associates of Applied Science in Early Childhood Education, Associates of Applied Science or degree or a certificate in paraprofessional teaching assistant, and there's also that Associates of Arts transfer degree in early childhood education, right? If you were in doing the kind of early childhood education, public school teacher or potentially education administrator, that would lead to a median wage. We saw that we had a lot of pause and concern around kind of preschool teachers at nonprofit programs, daycares, or teachers assistants in those spaces because they weren't really hitting the living wage threshold. What we came to realize is that Illinois, different than some of our other states in our region, has a very robust kind of pathway and industry credential sequence in the early childhood space. Many of you are obviously probably familiar with the Gateways for Opportunity kind of credentials and how those stack within the sector so that you can become kind of a administrator or a director of an early childhood program, which is obviously going to significantly alter and improve someone's wage and living situation. There's also, what we also found was throughout the state that the select universities, certain universities throughout the state have unique articulation agreements or partnerships with local community colleges such that AA, advanced certificates or AAS programs in early childhood could transfer and kind of articulate over to the bachelor's degree program, leading to kind of a stackable credential as well. So we included a lot of the AAS, a lot of the early childhood programs or occupations, knowing that if someone wanted to improve their situation in life, earn more, they could articulate a lot of their existing credits to select universities throughout the state. Next slide. We tried to show kind of those occupational progressions in terms of the post-secondary degrees through this part of the chart as well. Once again, at the bottom of the chart, you see the guided transfer where someone could graduate high school, go to a local community college, or maybe even go directly to a four-year university and get prepared for kindergarten through kind of secondary teaching, earning an associate's degree, an associate's of arts transfer degree, or directly earning a bachelor's in elementary, secondary, special education, ultimately leading to that professional educator license. If you went through a community college route for an early childhood education, there was once again that opportunity to transfer certain degrees over to the bachelor's degree or to kind of end there with a paraprofessional AAS or certificate starting as a teaching assistant. in that case, it's not as easy to transfer to the bachelor's degree, and we highly encourage people to at least always go through to the AAS and early childhood education, which had much more frequent transferability to select universities throughout the state. Next slide. Now, what you see here on your screen is a deep dive on the career-focused courses that we had a lot of recommendations that people kind of progress, and really the bread and butter of our model programs of study. I'll walk us through this a little slowly, just so if there's questions along the way and some points of clarification. You know, all our model programs of study guides are broken into sections with an orientation or introductory level at the 9th or 10th grade. They progress through a skill development phase in the 10th through 12th grade for high school students, a capstone experience typically in the 12th grade year, and then we make recommendations about courses that should be done in the first year of post-secondary to further their program of study. In this orientation level here, the course we're suggesting, Foundations to Teaching, overlaps or is, I think, a direct reference to the State Board of Education's high school course guide, and it's a CTE course that's offered in their education matrix. The differentiation starts to happen in the skill development phase of our model program of study. Well, the first courses I want to highlight here are Human Growth and Development or Child Growth and Development. Human Growth and Development is a secondary course offered by the State Board of Education, typically available in many CTE sequences. Child Growth and Development here, we're referring to what is typically offered at Illinois Community College as a kind of course in the early childhood education sequence or a program, right? And what we're recommending for districts who want to go this route is that they either do Human Growth and Development as a standalone high school course, or blend that or combine that with the Child Growth and Development college course and offer that as a dual credit experience and dual credit option for various students. The little symbol that you see here with 2 papers and a little certificate or a little check mark is one of the symbols for dual credit options, right? And I think in this course, Child Growth and Development at many community colleges was not only a dual credit or kind of also offered Illinois Articulation Initiative transferability and portability as well. Education Methodology is a high school CTE course that we recommended people progress in the sequence. And then we also made a reference and suggestion of Introduction to Education being offered as early as 10th grade. I want to add a little more caveats about that Intro to Education course. The Intro to Education course, as we envision it here at this kind of stage in the program of study, is very much a career exploration, introduction to the sector, and introduction to the field of education and teaching, right? This may have subtly different names at various community colleges. Many community colleges have an Intro to Education course which has embedded within it a clinical hours, 30, 40, 60 clinical hours of kind of workplace experience or observation experience. Many of those courses with clinical experiences require students to be of a certain age, a certain English language placement, and things of that nature. So I just wanted to highlight that in this particular case, this course at the skill development level is not that full clinical experience course that we're recommending, but it's some much more broader and introductory and career explorative Intro to Education course. What I recommend for many of you in the community college space is to look at kind of the competencies later in the guide for education and align those with some of your course description and course syllabi at your school, and see which of your courses and course code and subject area aligns a little better with this course, knowing that a lot of you have a lot of variance in terms of clinical hours and student eligibility requirements. As a capstone experience for the Education Broader Program of Study in the high school space, we really wanted to recommend that students do some sort of education, workplace experience, clinical observation. Many times at high school they have a CTE course that has like a co-op experience. Now ISB calls this an education workplace experience course, and we highly recommend that students do that aspect of their program of study because it counts towards the work-based learning requirements of the college career pathway endorsement. It actually cements their interest or makes them realize that they're not ready or actually desiring to be in the education space. So that's something that we should look at. That might be, for many of your community colleges, that education and workplace experience might overlap with your Intro to Education course, which has embedded workplace hours as well. We also, our advisory committee in this space, made a strong recommendation for the course, which is typically called Diversity in Education at many Illinois community colleges. And we made a recommendation that that course be offered for dual credit. Typically, the student eligibility requirements for this course were such that many students would be able to access this course and many teachers would be able to be certified as adjunct faculty as well. If your kind of high school program is much more down the early childhood space, we recommended courses aligned with the Gateways Early Childhood Educator Level 2 credential as a part of the CTE program as well. And last but not least, I wanted to highlight that this notion here of a foreign language seal by literacy. Well, we made a recommendation here is if you have students in your high school or in your community college who are bilingual and can graduate high school with the state seal by literacy on their diploma, we found that this would be beneficial to them down the line when they get their professional educator license, and they might seek what would be called like bilingual educator endorsements, and would prepare them for that aspect of their teaching career. And it's something that in the state is very much in demand and needed. So we definitely recommend it and wanted to highlight that here in our program of study as something that would be very worthwhile for students to pursue. At the post-secondary level, we kind of made recommendations that if you had not taken these courses by the time you graduated high school, you should start taking them your first year of college, right? Once again, child growth and development always stood out as a frequent course, not only in early childhood, but general education transfer degrees. This course, the exceptional child or students with disabilities, was frequent among many community colleges. Educational psychology had typically a requirement for students to have already passed Psychology 101 or something of that nature, but if students could do that, that would be great in the first year experience. Thank you, Terry, for the Gateways Level 2 credential. We did recommend that happen in the senior year, so there is some possibility that some students will be able to acquire that by the time they graduate high school, given the makeup of a senior year course. Thank you, Terry. I wanted to deep dive before I wanted to finish off around the general education courses, and then I'll pivot back to kind of these questions in the Q&A. Megan, you can help me highlight some of those when I get there. What I wanted to highlight in the general education courses, in the science row here on your screen, we had no strong or unique recommendations for which science courses should be done for anyone doing an education pathway. Mostly we recommend that students just continue along their sequence and earn AP or dual credit whenever possible. In social science, however, because many associates of arts transfer degrees had specific general education requirements, we made strong recommendations that students take either AP History or U.S. Government and Politics either as AP or dual credit. And then their capstone experience, if really highly recommend that students take psychology either as a dual credit course or an AP course. Many high schools are not able to implement psychology as a dual credit because it's difficult to find a teacher to certify as an adjunct faculty. So if your school can pivot towards the AP exam and the AP option, that is worthwhile as well. And we would set students up for success at the post-secondary level for many of the degrees and many of the transfer programs in education. In terms of math, like many of our pathways, we wanted to make sure students got to the right level of math, which included, in this case, pre-calculus, calculus, or general education statistics was frequently required in many education programs throughout the state. And if your student was not able to take an early college version of those courses, we recommended a transitional course that placed into your stats class at the post-secondary level. So transitional math, quantitative literacy, and statistics as the course we highly recommend versus transitional math like STEM or college algebra preparation. We also highly recommend it in the English sequence. The students get to either transitional English by their senior year or a AP English or dual credit English composition by that senior year experience that would set them up for success. If you could squeeze in either in your senior year or in your first year of college, oral communication, which is the II course typically known as speech, we highly recommend that as well. I'm going to take a pause to answer some questions. Megan, I don't know if you want to highlight certain ones for me first. I see a question from Catherine Jennings around EC Level 1. Where does that certificate fit in? So a lot of our advisory committee highly recommended that we should aim for the ECE Level 2 as really the thing that would get you an entry-level job in that sector, and that's why we highlighted the ECE Level 2. That was kind of on the recommendation of the advisory committee as well. So thank you for that question, Catherine.
And then Dawn is asking a question about Gateway Level 2 in high school. Is it offered in high school or is it offered in college?
I think for, like Terry mentioned, there might be an age requirement for the Gateways Level 2 credential, but we have heard in our kind of advisory committee that some high schools were aiming for that for Level 2 while in high school.
Okay, then we got Melissa in here is asking about college level English as a prereq. Her understanding is that there should not be a mix of classes for dual credit. Can we verify, is this a ICCB rule? We also have some EC courses that are IAI. Yeah. What if teachers are not qualified?
So I'll answer this question in multiple parts, right? So I think this question is about student eligibility requirements for certain courses for dual credit, specifically when those courses have an English 101 placement requirement. So I'll tackle this first, right? Yes, students should not be in a mixed class. If a course is for dual credit English 101 or English composition, those students should all be eligible to take that course on, and that is, I think, a rule and a requirement for many community colleges. Now, another thing though, some of these courses in the model program of study, the local college may place the kind of student eligibility requirements. Now, that is different for IAI courses. Typically for courses who are IAI and Articulate and part of the Illinois Articulation Initiative, those are typically going to have harder and more kind of stringent teacher-faculty requirements as well as student eligibility requirements. But for those courses that are not INI, the eligibility requirements are pretty much set by the local college, and their prerequisites for those courses or 1.2 adjunct faculty certification are going to be set by the local college and their existing processes.
The last question that we have that just popped up is from Jean. There's a question followed by a set of comments. And so the question is, has the new ECE legislation been considered for advising? Then the comment is, students who want to pursue ECE should be advised to pursue AAS route rather than the A route now that it fully transfers to all four-year universities.
So I think, and I see your comment, Amy Spies, about kind of non-IAI courses transfer. So let me kind of address both of these as well, right? So many of you may know there's been recent movement in the state to create more and increased transferability of education and early childhood courses to bachelor's degree programs. Typically, that has not always happened, or has always happened uniquely through individual one-on-one articulation agreements between local college and four-year university, right? And these kind of articulation agreements have been ad hoc or not sustainable or not scalable. So I think what Jean mentioned in her question was there's been new legislation to create, I think I understand it correctly, is that there's new ways to pursue an AAS that would prepare you for a transferable bachelor's degree program, or that some community colleges might become eligible to offer a bachelor's of applied science. At this point, this education program of study was made in 2019, 2020, when that legislation had not fully passed. And it's a little bit of a snapshot in time and reflection of that state of kind of the Illinois landscape at that time, where some AASs were transferable, but mostly students were generally advised to go through the Associates of Arts transfer degree. One of the things that we're going to ask all of you to answer at the end of this webinar is like, how should this guide change and how should we adjust it, right? We're going to be giving you all a survey is like, given the current context of education legislation, post-secondary programs, what recommendations or alterations would you make given the current landscape as well? But I just wanted to highlight at that time, we had not fully seen robust legislation around AAS transferability degrees. And last but not least, what I want to highlight here is kind of some of the courses that were chosen in our model programs of study for education for robust course competency development, right? So like I mentioned before, one of the courses that we recommend in our program of study is Introduction to Education, and we recommend a version of that course that does not include clinical hours or experiences, but you should really look at these competencies, look at these kind of lines here about learning outcomes, and see how they match up with your current course offerings or courses, and which of these courses would you align to this kind of recommendation. I think I talked to some of the folks at Kaskaskia Community College, and they have a course called Education 224, Foundations of American Education, which has a lot of these key competencies and aspects, and they have a different course called Intro to Education. So really what matters is kind of the course competency and learning objectives alignment. Next slide. The other course that we kind of created robust competencies in our program of study is called Diversity in Education, right? This is a course about kind of creating a robust environment for student learning, teaching diverse students, knowledge of diverse students, and reflective and responsive teaching, right? You see in our guide in the back all of these competencies in robust space. And although these courses don't have portability or transferability currently, we do encourage high schools and community colleges to align to the competencies of these guides, as we generated these guides through a synthesis of various community college, various high school, and various four-year university programs and courses. And we think that if there's a future portability or articulation opportunity, we're going to align to these greatly. And with that, I turn it over to our colleagues from Sauk Valley Community College to kind of share with us about how they've been implementing education pathways and programs.
Well, thank you, Heather and Juan Jose. I just want to say as we get started that this is certainly a work in progress, and we have not arrived. We are still on that pathway and progression of our own. And so it is a total learning experience as we go along. And as you just heard this morning, with changes in legislation and according to ECE and EDU as well, things change. And so this is where we're at. We were just asked to share how we got where we're at. And so here's where we began. We had, as we started this pathway work, and we've been doing this for about 5 years, we had no dual credit in EDU. There was no request for it. There was no demand for it. So we didn't offer any EDU dual credit. A few years ago, we added a couple of courses in our early childhood program, an intro to early childhood and a child development course that we rescheduled so that a local school district could send students to take part in that as part of work that they were doing on their Gateways Level 2. So they offered in their own district a Gateways Level 1. And after students finished that their junior year, then their senior year, they were able to come and join us on campus for credit in those two courses. We had a lot of dual credit in the Gen Ed area with our area schools, and two of those, Intro to Psych, our Psych 103, and Intro to Communications, COM 131, have been accepted by ISB as part of that progression. And we have had a lot of discussions with our partners, our high school partnerships, about why Gen Eds can't be a piece of that. So that is a battle. It's not a battle, it's a discussion that we continue to have. And we've seen some progress there as well. So here's where we are now. This work has caused us to take a really strong look at what we can offer as dual credit and what is in the best interest of students. How do they get the most bang for their buck in dual credit? So we have revisited some of our coursework. We're in the process of revising that. It's in our curriculum committee now, so that the courses that we can offer for dual credit don't go just to SOC, but will be transferable to currently to WIU in some articulation work that we're doing there. And I will say it is this pathway work that has really moved this for us. We have had conversations over the years with different four-year universities, and it is this pathway work, trying to get these pieces of dual credit into the high schools that's really moved this so that we can work on this 2+2 agreement. So that's been very encouraging for us. We as a staff, my colleagues at the college, our Vice President John Mandrell, who's on this call with us, and we'll talk about this as well, our deans, our faculty, we got together and we said, what's in the best interest of students? What can we offer without it being devastating to our own course load? And we considered prerequisites, what transfers, what kind of entry-level knowledge would students need to have in order to be successful in these courses? The last thing we wanted to do was say, well, we'll offer this course and then have students take it and not be successful, not have some kind of something to show for it at the end. So I don't know, John, do you want to address some of that process that we went through and how we looked at the community as well as protecting some of our own course load?
Yeah, and you said it very well. Sometimes the very first conversation we have is, what kind of faculty do you have? What are their interests? What are their qualifications? When you're trying to teach education within an education setting, that usually comes pretty easy. So that part worked out very well. And I'll also add that, there have been some silver linings in COVID too. It has allowed us to expand access in ways through whether it's streaming or hybrid courses, and really allowing us to, I guess, think differently, like we've heard through COVID. But again, it gets back to having one-on-one conversations with each district about what works for them, the time, ensuring they have the right amount of seat time, it's scheduled the right way. If there's any equipment needs, like any other dual credit course, all of those things are discussed first as well. And then we have some partners that are as close as 5 or 10 minutes away. And does it make more sense for them just to come directly on our campus so that we can have larger numbers and have a more rich, teaching and learning experience too? So dual credit comes in all shapes and sizes, and it varies by wherever a district is at this moment and what can possibly be best to deliver there. And of course, always looking through, what's best for the students and what we can possibly help them with.
Thanks, John. So we have had some successes, right? We've revised some curriculum. We're putting that through so that it's more transferable, not just to us and not just as elective credit, but as EDU credit to a 4-year for that path. We have lots of faculty at our high schools who are qualified to teach EDU courses. And so that makes offering dual credit much easier. We are a large rural district. We have 17 different feeder schools that come into us. And so we cover quite a large area. So one of the things that we already have in place is what we call a SOC block on the western end of our district. So students from districts on the end of that, we like to say we go from the Mississippi River to the Rock River. And so students who are closer to the Mississippi side can sign up for courses there as dual credit in a partnership that we have with our schools there. And so that saves a lot of travel time and makes some courses accessible that wouldn't otherwise be accessible to those students. We also have districts who are really wondering, how can I fill a course? How can I take a full-time employee and put them with 4 to 6 students who are on my education pathway? So again, our districts are small and they're rural. Some of our districts have, maybe 150 kids in their high school total, 9th through 12th grade. And so they're not going to have 40 kids identified in the education pathway. So they're trying to figure that out. And as John said, COVID has given us some answers there. And so we have some districts who are networking to try and figure out how can we share instruction across our own districts? How can we deliver courses in a virtual setting that students still get the support they need, but they don't have to travel to do that. And we don't have to put a full-time employee in those courses. One of the most exciting things and successes that we have seen on our own campus is the increase in our enrollment in education. So in 2019 and 2020, we had only 50 students enrolled in EDU. So we continued to struggle. We believed in that program. Our administration continued to work with us, and but we had 50 students identified. In 2021, our enrollment went up to 93, and this year it's at 82. So the work that we've put in over these years seems to be paying off, and that's exciting for not just for us, but for our districts who are looking to bring back those teachers into their own districts that have been raised here. We continue to have challenges, and so the cost of dual enrollment is always the one that comes up over and over again. So I'm just going to take a step back. John is going to address some of those challenges, but some of the things that we've put in place to deal with it as well.
Yeah, we've tried different things with tuition over the years for dual enrollment. Our most recent one, which we implemented last year, was that if a high school student takes a course in their own district with their own instructor, it is a $50 flat rate. That's per course, so very affordable. If they take it on our campus with our instructor, it is a free reduced lunch model. So everyone gets some sort of discount. So if it is it's a 25, 50, or 75% discount, depending on whether or not you're free reduced. So, or not at all. So that would come with just the 25% discount. That model seems to be working really well for us. And we actually build the districts for that, for the classes that are taken at the high school. That took a lot of communication with our local districts, made to emphasize why we like to do it that way. One reason is making sure the bill gets paid and that students get enrolled. We don't run into registration issues, particularly if a student was an English 101 this semester, and then come December, the bill never got paid, and we've got prereq issues with trying to get into 103. So it has helped in that respect. We're very flexible with districts about how we go about it. I know some districts will add it as a fee, much like athletics or driver's ed, that if you're in dual credit, there's a $50 course fee. Some just pick it up entirely. But in the past, we had a model where it was half rate billed to the students, and we had a very difficult time managing payment that would go to the home. The bill sometimes would not be paid, and then it would have a domino effect on the district as well. Counselors weren't always aware either that the bill had not been paid, and then we had registration issues. So it's been a moving target for us, but we do like where we've landed on this, particularly just having a lot of communication with districts, being flexible about how the payment plan works. And we're starting to see as well that counselors like it too, because now they're not managing money issues possibly at home either. So, and we're able to get students registered right from the beginning. So cost of dual enrollment is always something that's a statewide discussion. And I'll be really interested to study the data on this to see if it has helped us in terms of revenue, but also just in terms of efficiency too.
One of the other pieces that we have of that helps our students is that we have an agreement with our area career center, Whiteside Area Career Center, and students can get dual credit there for free. And so we are working with them to help embed a piece of the pathway into the Career Center. So students can get that early childhood piece, they can get Gateway's Level 1 credential there, and then they can get some additional dual credit through the Career Center that is no cost to them or their district. So that's another piece that we're working with. Other challenges, again, how to fill an education-specific course, travel distance to campus for students who want to be on campus, who prefer that as opposed to online. There are scheduling conflicts when you have a small district and you have all kinds of folks who want to do everything in a small district, who haven't been forced to choose before. Am I going to be in band or am I going to be in the education pathway because that's the only time period that's available? So that continues to be a struggle for our small districts. how do we make sure that we're offering something that's in the best interest of both our community college staff and our dual credit folks. And then we're finding that we have this real challenge with some of our districts where when they have someone who comes in and says, I want to be a teacher, they immediately put them in what they call their college bound track. And they then will take all kinds of AP or dual credit that traditionally are gen ed courses because that's what students need. And they don't put them into an education specific pathway that has education courses within it. And so what happens is that our students are prepared for college, but they're missing that piece of where they're preparing for education, for career in education. And so we have some of that mindset change that needs to go on. We have to do a little shifting there with some of our districts to really help them figure out that it's not just preparing students for college, but this pathway helps them to figure out much more specifically, is there a grade level and age of students that I like? Is there a way that that I can be involved in education, but I really don't want to necessarily be, a classroom teacher, or maybe I can be a special ed teacher. I mean, all of those pieces that that really are important, that are a piece of the pathway, that just having college bound coursework isn't meeting the challenge. So that's where we are as a college. We have some dual credit, dual enrollment options that students can take. Some of these have no prerequisites. We felt that was really important for a lot of students. And we have a lot of online offerings that students can take. And so those are the pieces that we have at the college that we're willing to work with. We continue to listen to our district partners to see what is it that they really need and how can we really meet their challenge.
Janice, can you speak to what are some of your most popular courses and kind of what you think makes them most accessible?
Sure. I think at this point, what we have seen is that we have an EDU 105 course, which is exploring careers in education, very similar to that, basic education course that you talked about earlier, Juan Jose. And our districts have found that with that rework, they can talk about what it means to be a teacher, some of those pieces that don't traditionally come up. We know that students think they know what it means to be a teacher because they've been in school, but they don't understand the process from the other side of the desk. And so this really helps to explain some of that, where districts can also take the observation course and offer that to students, because we want students to see all kinds of different levels. So that just makes sense. They can take that, early on as juniors. And then we're also reworking our clinical course, where students can go out and the 60-hour experience that is required for the endorsement can be embedded within that coursework. And so we're looking at those kinds of pieces, and those are the kinds of courses that are most are easiest for our districts to use and to take on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janice and John. We really appreciate that deep dive and all of the good work that you all are doing. So now we want to take a moment to kind of get some feedback and reflect on some things that are still circling in your mind, some items that are possibly squaring your thinking, and maybe 3 takeaways. So if we could take a moment and pause, and if you could look at the questions on the screen and drop a response in the chat, that'd be greatly appreciated. So what's circling in your mind? Are there any questions that are still lingering that you would like for us to address? Are there any takeaways that you have that you might want to share? And then is there something that squares your thinking, or maybe you had like an aha moment during this presentation? If you could share that in the chat, again, that'd be greatly appreciated. Okay, so if you have a smartphone, one thing that we would like for you to do is take that phone and kind of glaze over the screen. And so we have a survey where we would like to receive feedback about the model program of study and also this particular webinar. And so here are some key questions that are going to be highlighted in our survey. So we want to know, again, what are your thoughts and attitudes about the implementation of this model program of study within your particular organization? We're also looking to assess the effectiveness of our advisory committee, since we know that some of our advisory committee members are on the call, and or welcome you to join an upcoming committee. And then lastly, we would love for you to assess the effectiveness of the webinar as well. So again, please take the time to review our survey. We're gonna add that information into the chat box, and then we're also gonna email you the survey links, that way you have access to that. And so here are our upcoming model of program or model of program study webinars that are coming up. We have one in November on manufacturing and engineering, and then again in January on information technology. Again, all of these are linked to our website, so please feel free to Google us and then go and register for our upcoming webinar sessions. I would encourage you to share this information with other colleagues that might be interested as well. And so we are looking to create other additional pathways as well. And so the 3 pathways that we are looking to create are: one in human and public services, non-education, hospitality and tourism. Culinary hospitality is another phrase for that. And then also transportation, distribution, and logistics. In the survey, you can select what committee, advisory committee, you are interested in joining. So I'm going to turn it over to Juan to talk a little bit about IWIN.
There's a question about whether the advisory board had representation from the early childhood space, and the answer is yes. We had some representation from INCRA, or kind of some advising from INCRA on that process, as well as some community college faculty from the ECE space as well, Jean. So thank you for your question. Thank you for that feedback as well, Michael. I want to make a last plug here for those of you joining. For those of you very interested in implementing a pathway, moving along implementing the pathway, and are looking for work-based learning opportunities, experiences, and what they could look like, how robust should they be, how they fulfill the various requirements from the programs of study being set forth by ICCB or by the Illinois State Board of Education, I really encourage all of you to check out our webpage, the Illinois Work-Based Learning Innovation Network. We have a resource hub, we have a newsletter, we have monthly webinars. So what we're doing is, while simultaneously to kind of, or like coinciding with each monthly webinar on the model programs of study and the academic courses and sequences, we're similarly doing a complementary, the work-based learning activities and resources in that industry sector as well. So I really encourage all of you to check this out. I know there's a new requirement by ICCB that programs of study must at some point complete a team-based challenge. You will find information about what that is and how that can be integrated into your sequence at our IWIN Resource Hub. So it's something that we find very helpful, and we're trying to create the content such that it coincides with the subject area of each program of study on a monthly basis. So thank you all, and I hope you kind of join my colleague Heather in those webinars and resource hubs as well.
So that concludes our session for today. Again, we thank you so much for your participation and for joining us. Again, we hope to see you in our upcoming webinar sessions. I want to give a special thank you and shout out to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us and supporting us in this webinar.